In 1983, Japan was making too much whiskey. By 2003, a single film made it famous. By 2018, there was not enough left to sell. The moment Suntory stopped making it, everyone else started. Osaka, Japan. 1887. Before there was Hibiki, before there was a Japanese whiskey industry worth speaking of, there was a man from Hiroshima who believed Japan could make something Scotland had spent centuries perfecting. Masataka Taketsuru was born into a sake brewing family in 1894. In 1918, he traveled to Scotland, the only place in the world where whiskey was made the way he wanted to make it. He studied applied chemistry at Glasgow University and apprenticed at two working distilleries, Longmorn in Speyside and Hazelburn in Campbelltown. He returned to Japan in 1920 with two handwritten notebooks, now known as the Taketsuru Notes, the most important documents in the history of Japanese whiskey. He also returned with a Scottish wife named Jessie Roberta Cowan, known as Rita, from Kirk-in-Tillash, East Dunbartonshire. They had married in Glasgow against both families' wishes. The company that had sponsored his Scotland trip abandoned its whiskey project for financial reasons before he could use anything he had learned. In 1923, Taketsuru joined a company called Kotobukiya, later renamed Suntory, on a 10-year contract. His first task was to oversee construction of Japan's first commercial whiskey distillery at Yamazaki, completed in 1924. When the contract ended in 1934, Suntory offered to keep him. He refused. He and Rita moved to Hokkaido because its climate and peat resembled the Scotland he had apprenticed in, and built what eventually became Nikka whiskey. While the first distillates were maturing, Masataka sold apple juice to keep the business solvent, and Rita taught English lessons to keep them fed. Rita died in January 1961 at the age of 64 in Yoichi, Hokkaido, overlooking the distillery they had built together. She never saw the industry she helped create reach the world. Masataka had both their names engraved on her tombstone overlooking Yoichi Distillery. He survived her by 18 years. The reason this matters is not biographical sentiment, it is structural. Every bottle of Hibiki 17 ever produced was blended from the distilleries that came directly from this lineage. Yamazaki, which Taketsuru built with his own hands in 1924. Hakushu and Shita were both opened by Kizo Saji, who was Shinjiro Torii's son and Suntory's second-generation master blender in the early 1970s. When Hibiki 17 draws from all three, it draws from 60 years of accumulated philosophy about what Japanese whiskey should be. Kizo Saji commissions the development of Hibiki in 1987. Japan's domestic whiskey market has been contracting for 4 years. In 1983, Suntory's flagship blend sold 12 million cases in a single year. By 1987, consumption is falling every quarter. Shochu has taken the younger generation. Tax reforms have made imported scotch more competitive. The salaryman culture that made Japanese whiskey a professional marker is losing its grip. The emotional fact underneath all of that is simple. Hibiki 17 was created during a dying market, not a boom. Chief blender Koichi Inatomi samples from 1 million casks across Suntory's warehouses. He and Saji select 30 distinct malt and grain whiskeys from Yamazaki, Hakushu, and Chita. The result is Hibiki 17, named for the youngest age statement in the blend. It was released in 1989 to mark Suntory's 90th anniversary. Per capita whiskey consumption in Japan is by then already on a trajectory that will take it from 10.6 liters annually to 2.3 liters by 2003. An 80% collapse over 2 decades. Saji builds a monument during a contraction. That detail matters for everything that comes after. The bottle he designs to carry this whiskey is not built from a marketing brief. The 24-faceted glass represents Japan's Nijushi Seki, the 24 micro-seasons of the ancient lunisolar calendar. These are divisions of the solar year into segments of roughly 15 days each, marking transitions in nature that Western calendars have no equivalent for. The specific quality of late October light. The first cold morning of early September. The bottle's shape is an argument that time in Japan moves at finer resolution than anywhere else. The label is hand-pressed Ekizen washi paper, a material with 1,500 years of documented use, officially carried by court nobles and samurai since the 14th century. The calligraphy is by Tansetsu Ojino. a master calligrapher. The paper itself was designed by artist Eriko Horiki. The neckband is Koki Murasaki purple, a color historically restricted to Japanese nobility. At the time, it looked like luxury branding. Decades later, every one of those design choices would become evidence in a criminal investigation. Inside the blend itself, a small proportion of the malt has been aged in Mizunara oak, Japanese oak, harvested from protected forests in Hokkaido. Mizunara trees must be at least 200 years old before they can be cut for cask production. The wood itself is so porous, and its name translates directly to water oak, that casks made from it leak and require constant maintenance. A single Mizunara cask costs approximately $5,000, between 4 and 10 times the price of a standard American oak barrel. The trees in national forests cannot be felled on demand. They must fall naturally, which means the annual supply is fixed by biology, not by commerce. What Mizunara imparts to the whiskey cannot be replicated through any combination of American or European cask. It gives notes of sandalwood, incense, and white pepper, a quality that whiskey professionals consistently describe as impossible to source from any other wood. Suntory has been aging whiskey in Mizunara since the 1940s, initially because wartime trade restrictions had cut off access to American and European oak. What began as a practical substitution became the defining characteristic of their most celebrated expressions. The Mizunara component in Hibiki 17 is one reason the blend has a profile that cannot be reconstructed after the fact by anyone at any price. Kizo Saji dies in 1999. The market he built this bottle for had spent a decade walking away from it. He never saw what Hibiki 17 became. He never saw what it attracted. Tokyo Park Hyatt Hotel, 2003. Bill Murray sits in a leather armchair in a dinner jacket. A bottle of Hibiki 17 sits beside him. A film director gives him lengthy instructions in Japanese. The interpreter translates them into approximately 4 words. Murray delivers his line to camera with straight-faced exhaustion. For relaxing times, make it Suntory time. The film is lost in translation. Sofia Coppola wrote the role specifically for Murray, who agreed without signing a contract. The production had committed a crew to Tokyo and spent over $1 million in pre-production before they knew whether their lead was showing up. He arrived a week late, jet-lagged in a way indistinguishable from the character he was playing. Lost in Translation was made for $4 million. It grossed $118.7 million. That's not a typo, by the way. Japanese whiskey began appearing on cocktail menus in New York, London, and Sydney. Retailers started carrying it. The whiskey community took notice. Demand increased. Suntory kept shipping. The bottles selling in 2005 had been planned in the late 1980s. The bottles needed in 2017 had to be distilled in the year 2000. And in 2000, Japan was producing the least whiskey it had made in decades. Suntory had cut production at Cheetah sharply through the 1990s. Nikka mothballed its Sendai facility in 2002. Kirin exited whiskey entirely in 2005. These were rational decisions given domestic demand at the time. A veteran blender quoted in Whiskey magazine described it plainly: "We are not running out of whiskey. We are running out of certain kinds of whiskey." Nobody was producing for a global boom they could not predict. The stock being laid down during those years was designed for the market that existed, not the one that was about to arrive. The entire whiskey output of Japan equals the combined production of 2 Scottish distilleries, Glenfiddich and Glenlivet. That number had never been a problem when the world wasn't paying attention. Once it was, the math was irreversible. From 2013 onward, once the scale of the problem was apparent, Suntory invested over $182 million into expanding production and warehouse capacity at Yamazaki and Hakushu. New casks, new filling equipment, new aging space. It did not buy time. A 17-year-old whiskey requires 17 years. A Mizunara cask requires 200 years of tree growth before the wood can even be harvested. Those are not problems money solves after the fact. The managed retreat began quietly. In 2015, 3 years before the 17 was discontinued, Suntory discontinued Hibiki 12. The year after that, Hakushu 12 was temporarily pulled from shelves. The pattern was visible to Anyone paying attention, expressions were disappearing in order of age, youngest first, as the contraction era stock ran out tier by tier. Hibiki 17 was not a sudden decision made in 2018. It was the third move in a sequence that had started in 2015, and it was always going to end here. In November 2014, Jim Murray published the 2015 edition of his Whiskey Bible. He scored Suntory's Yamazaki Single Malt Sherry Cask 2013 at 97.5 out of 100, near indescribable genius. For the first time in the book's 12-year history, not a single Scotch whiskey made the top 5. The British press responded with headlines using the word humiliation. Japanese whiskey exports surged 300% year on year. Hibiki 17 moved from approximately $80 at retail to over $200 within months. The same bottle, created during the worst years of the Japanese market, became the most coveted blend on the planet. In September 2018, Suntory announced that Hibiki 17 would be discontinued due to a shortage of aged whiskey stocks. A bottle that once sat on retail shelves became something people were afraid to open. Within one calendar month, remaining retail stock quadruples in price. By late 2020, the few bottles surfacing in Tokyo command €475. By 2025, a standard 750 milliliter bottle averages just over 300 pounds on secondary markets. The Kacho Fujetsu limited edition, 600 bottles ever produced in total, averages 850 pounds, with 9 out of 10 listings finding a buyer at asking price. For collectors, the question had changed. Not, can I afford one? Is this even real? Most people never heard about what happened next. Kizo Saji designed the 24-facet bottle with a proprietary mold. The perfectly symmetrical geometry requires precision tooling that cannot be accurately replicated without Suntory's original equipment. Authentic bottles show perfectly uniform facets at identical depth and spacing. Under a desk lamp, genuine bottles reflect light evenly across all 24 faces. By 2020, criminal operations across Europe, North America, and Southeast Asia had reverse-engineered the bottle well enough to fool casual buyers, not well enough to fool the bottle itself. Counterfeit operations targeting Hibiki work in 3 categories. The first and most common is the refilled authentic bottle, a real Suntory bottle with a replaced or resealed cap filled with lower-grade liquid. These are the hardest to detect because the packaging is genuine. The second is a full counterfeit with a fabricated bottle, fabricated label, and fabricated contents. The third is mislabeled product, a lower age statement or no age statement blend presented as a premium expression. In 2022, UK trading standards seized over 17,000 counterfeit bottles of premium spirits in a single operation. Some contained methanol at levels 400% above legal limits. Methanol metabolizes into formaldehyde and formic acid in the human body. The bottles being sold as Hibiki 17 were not merely worthless. Some were chemically dangerous. Interpol's Operation Lumen, running from 2022 through 2023, recovered 42 tons of counterfeit alcohol across 17 countries. Japanese whiskey was among the 3 primary target categories, alongside aged Scotch and cognac. 71% of fake luxury spirits in that operation had been sold through social media, bypassing the verification infrastructure of licensed retailers and auction houses. The whiskey community that mourned the discontinuation in 2018 is the same community most targeted by these operations. They are the buyers willing to pay secondary prices through informal channels to find a bottle that no longer exists through official ones. The grief created the market created the fraud. Keizo Saji named this whiskey after the sound that continues after the original stops. He died in 1999. The bottle he designed was discontinued in 2018, and then it kept going in secondary markets, tracking every surviving bottle in collectors' cellars, where sealed bottles sit, because opening them means accepting the last one is gone, in counterfeit operations that Interpol now monitors across 3 continents. Rita Takatsuru died in Yoichi in 1961, before the industry she helped build was known outside Japan. Masataka died in 1979, before anyone outside the whiskey world had heard of Yamazaki. Keizo Saji died in 1999, before a film director put Hibiki 17 on a silver screen and changed what Japanese whiskey meant to the world. Every person who built this bottle was gone before the world arrived. The bottle that defined Japanese whiskey is no longer made by the company that created it. Suntory stopped making it. Everyone else started.